Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me. If you're here tonight, it is June 9th, Tuesday, and we're going to be discussing nutrition facts on food labels. And right now I don't see anybody on. Now I see one. Anyway, I'm Tammi Flynn from the WRAC. I'm a registered dietitian. And again, we're talking about food labels, and I will try to keep it as simple as possible. Food label reading can be very complex and confusing, so we will try to keep it as simple as possible. One thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of information not only on the food label but on packaging in general. Marketing does an amazing job of selling a product, so be wary if it's screaming out, low carb, natural, light, good for you, just be wary, because a lot of times that becomes misinformation. So learning how to read the food label is a good start to really get a good idea of really what's in that product. So I have a food box here, and I don't know if you're going to be able to read this at home, but I'm going to hold it up anyway, and hopefully it's not backwards to you. Hi, Jennifer. So what we're going to cover tonight is we're going to cover the serving size, the calories, the nutrients such as the fat, carbohydrates, protein, and cholesterol, and then other nutrients, and also the ingredient list. All right, so let's start with the serving size, because this is where people tend to not really pay attention, and they end up eating a lot bigger portion than what the actual serving size was for that food. So this is corn checks, all right? And this serving size up here, it's the amount. This whole box has about 13 servings. And so a serving size that they record is 1.5 cups, okay? So 1.5 cups will, that is what is recorded on the side with the calories, fat, and all the other nutrients, all right? So it always starts with the serving size for that food that you're eating. Look at that before you go any further, so then you kind of get an idea of how many calories you're going to be eating, all right? So the next thing we read is the calories. And as you know, calories is an energy. That is how food is measured. And we need energy. We need calories to run our bodies. We have to have calories. Everybody has a little bit different needs of how many calories. And so we'll get into a little bit of discussion about the percent daily value. But we need calories, all right? So the calories is up here. It's 150 calories for 1.5 cups of the cereal, just the cereal alone, all right? You come on over here, it says add 1/2 cup of skim milk, and you're at 190 calories, all right? So that's how to read that. You move on down to the total fat. So the calories come from 3 different sources. They come from the fat, the carbohydrates, and the protein. All right. So they always list the fat first, and on the beginning it has the total fat, and this has pretty much less than 1 gram of fat in this 1.5 cups of the cereal. You add 1/2 cup of milk, and it's still under 1 gram of fat. Pretty low in fat, all right? It goes down and breaks down the fat in the different sources. If you listen to the nutrition talk of last week or a couple weeks ago, the different types of fat, the saturated and the unsaturated, which are your polyunsaturated and monounsaturated, it breaks those down. It even has trans fat listed. Now remember, trans fat, basically the FDA has approved those. They're banned from our foods. So hopefully we do not see trans fats anymore. they're not very safe in our body. However, they're still listed on here, but there is zero, and there is zero saturated fat, and there's 0.5 polyunsaturated and 0 grams, okay? Probably doesn't mean a lot to you. It'll make a little more sense when I start talking about the daily percent values, okay? Then it has a cholesterol, it has 0, and which doesn't surprise me. It's not an animal product, and that's probably why it doesn't have saturated fat as well. And sodium, it has 280 milligrams for that 1.5 cup, and it doesn't put the amount with the milk. It just ups the daily percent value, okay? And then we have carbohydrates. So they're gonna break the carbohydrates down into dietary fiber, total carbohydrates, dietary fiber, and total sugars, including added sugars, all right? This is something new in the labeling that I like to see, because there's some naturally occurring sugars, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and then there's added sugars. Hi, Connie. So the total carbohydrates in here is 33 grams, and then dietary fiber is 2 grams. Total sugars are 4, included added sugars, which is 4, all right? So that's all in one. And then protein is 3 grams, all right? So that's how it's broken down as far as where the calories come from. So let's talk about the percent daily value. I've never really paid a lot of attention to that as a dietitian, mainly because I've never really had to teach somebody how to read a food label. I tried to help them distinguish what foods they're eating and how to improve some of the healthier ones. So I haven't had a lot of experience with teaching people how to read food labels, but it is important, especially when you get to the ingredients list, all right? So the percent daily values, that is based on a 2,000 calorie diet, all right? If you're not eating 2,000 calories and you know that is too much, this is just based on an average adult, okay? It's just generic. It's not male or female, all right? So it's based on a 2,000 calorie diet. A little bit high for women, and maybe it's not high enough for men, but it kind of all depends on your activity level. So all of these values are based on that 200 or 2,000 calorie diet. So this person, the percent value for fat, sorry, I can barely read it. It's just tiny little letters. Since there's less than 1 gram, it's like less than 1% of their daily percent value, okay? And I'll talk about what some of those values actually are, all right? Saturated fat, we really want to keep that as low as possible in overall daily intake. Cholesterol is 0. Sodium is about 12%. That's based on a 2,300 milligram average percent or amount for a daily intake. And then carbohydrates is about 12%. Again, all this is based on 2,000 calories. And fiber's 2 grams, it's only 1%. And then protein, protein doesn't have a value because there's not something, most Americans get plenty of protein, all right? So the percent daily values, those also are in the vitamins and minerals added, okay? So we'll look at those as well. But what I want to share with you, so saturated fat for an adult, a daily amount is under 20 grams, okay? All of the food label reading is probably meaningless unless you have a good idea of what you're taking in every day. With that said, some people use apps. They assess what they're taking in, and so that's really helpful to get an idea of how much total fat they're having, how many total carbs they're having, how much fiber, how much saturated fat. So if you know that, then reading a label is going to help you, guide you, picking a better product when comparing cereals or breads or, you know, like tortillas or, you know, meats, that kind of thing. So again, the percent daily values are based on a 2,000 calorie diet, all right? So saturated fat, 20 grams. So you want to be looking for 20% or less in one label, okay? Sodium, 2,300 milligrams. A lot of foundations are asking to have that lowered to about 1,500 milligrams per day. The sodium levels in the American diet is well over 4,000 to 5,000 milligrams, really high. And that comes in from convenience foods, restaurant foods, mainly foods that aren't cooked at home, other than convenience foods, all right? Dietary fiber, 28 grams. I've always heard 25 to 35 grams. Kind of depends on, you know, your size, but 28 grams is what they're asking. Added sugars, no more than 50 grams. That's added sugars. And remember, 4 grams is 1 teaspoon of sugar. So that's well over 12 teaspoons of sugar a day. Most Americans are eating 83 grams or more a day of sugar, added sugar. Okay, so added sugar is different than naturally occurring sugar, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Okay, vitamin D that you'll see down here in the ingredient list, 20 micrograms is what you're shooting for. That's a daily value. Calcium, about 1,300 milligrams. Iron, 18 milligrams. And potassium, 4,700 milligrams is what you're looking at, all right? So all of those are listed. This even has vitamin A, C, D, B1, other vitamins and minerals in it. So, and they have percent daily values. Some of the things aren't listed here, mainly because those are some of the general that we look at. So again, you're looking for, you know, the higher numbers, especially in the vitamin and mineral department. But the other thing to be cautious of is most cereals, they add vitamins and minerals. If you're taking a supplement, just be cautious about, you know, not overtaking a vitamin and mineral supplement such as A, D, E, and K. Vitamin A, D, E, and K. Those are all toxic if you get too much of them because they're fat soluble. So anyhow, so again, the percent daily value, again, is based on a 2,000 calorie diet, all right? One thing I appreciate about this label, so if you look down further, you have the ingredients list, okay? Ingredients. The first ingredient is what is mostly in that box, all right? So whatever you're eating, whatever you're trying to eat, you want that to be labeled first, such as rice, or this is corn check. So the first thing is whole grain corn, yay. If there's something like sugar or fat or something added first, then that product is loaded with extra flavorings that is not part of the food, okay? So the little or the least amount of ingredients on a label, the better. However, you're gonna get some added. What I appreciate about this ingredient list is it lists some ingredients, okay? Of course, it goes to cornmeal, then sugar, cornstarch. You're gonna have different names for sugar in some products, just to be wary, so that it doesn't, so let's say they have molasses and they have maltose and they have sucrose. They add those smaller amounts so that they don't put that first as the first listing. Does that make sense? So if you just did all sucrose, which is table sugar, that would be listed probably first because there's such a high amount of sugar in that product. So they'll disguise other sugars just so that they can have more sugar without it looking like it's the number one thing in that product, okay? So it's kind of sneaky, but it is what it is. Anyway, this has vitamin E, and then it'll say mixed, added to preserve freshness, All right. So it's telling you why some of these things are added. Vitamins and minerals, calcium carbonate, iron and zinc, mineral nutrients, vitamin C, sodium ascorbate, A and B vitamins, niacinamide, and then it goes on and on what the names are of those vitamins. I have never seen this this extensive. Usually it just lists the scientific name of that, and if you don't know, if you don't understand, if you can't pronounce the word that's in that ingredient label, it's probably not the best thing to eat. All right, it could be just a lot of added preservatives and byproducts that you don't really need. All right, so that's the ingredient list. And again, on the ingredient list, it's in descending order. So you're going to have the highest amount of whatever's in that product going down to the least amount. All right, so that's that so far. All right, let's break down. Let's talk about the fats. So we talked a little bit about the saturated, trans, and polyunsaturated, monounsaturated. Again, saturated fat, usually you're going to find that in animal products. Some products that have coconut oil or hydrogenated oil, you're going to find some saturated, but you want under 10 grams in a serving of that because your maximum amount is 20 grams a day of saturated fat. Okay, that's the bad fat. That's what can cause some problems raising LDL cholesterol or your bad cholesterol. All right, and then trans fat, again, that has been deemed unsafe by the FDA, so there shouldn't be as you shouldn't find that in any products now, I would think. And then polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, you want more of those. Those are the better fats for you. Lynn says, just eat fruits and veggies and no boxed or processed. Yep, good idea. But some things you can buy, boxed and they're fine. Such as, let me show you, this oatmeal, how simple this is. This is very simple. Ingredients, whole grain rolled oats. That's very simple. No added anything. And so that's a simple ingredient list for you, okay? What else? Okay, so we talked about the labels being based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Again, that may be really too high for you or it might not be high enough, but that's what the labels are, just generic that way based on that percent daily value. Vitamins and minerals will vary a little bit from male to female, but for the percent daily values, that's a pretty good basis to use as the percent daily values for the vitamins and minerals. All right. We talked about sodium, trying to get that down to about 1,500 milligrams. That's about 2/3 of a teaspoon of salt total in a day. Quite a bit. All right. We talked about fiber, shooting for 28 grams. On a label, I used to make a suggestion to people based on 100 calories. Try to go for 3 grams of fat or less. That's just a general rule of thumb. Something like this has 3 grams, this has 150 calories, so that's even lower in fat. That's based on the American Heart Association and getting 30% or less calories from fat. Okay. And again, protein, most people in the United States aren't low in protein unless you're on a tube feeding or a TPN and not getting any nutrients added at all. And that's, that's usually not going to happen. Carbohydrates, they're not all created equal. Remember that. You're looking for a higher fiber source. So again, this has carbohydrates in it. This has 27 grams of carbohydrates. These are not processed carbohydrates. So you look down, dietary fiber, 4 grams. That's awesome. You're looking to 3 to 5 grams per 100 to 150 calories is a good rule of thumb. Okay, I got a question. When a label says total fat 9 grams and saturated fat 1 gram, trans fat 0, where are the other 8 grams? Probably the unsaturated. So look a little bit further down on your list. Polyunsaturated, monounsaturated will make up the other amount of your total fat. All right. So your saturated, this one says actually 0.5. It's got 3 grams of fat, and then polyunsaturated 1 and monounsaturated 1. Even that comes out to 2.5 because you don't, they can say 0 if it's 0.5 grams or less in anything. So this could say, the best example was, it was a butter product when my husband and I were competing, and it said no fat, but that's the first ingredient was fat on the label, but because of the serving size was so small, it was less than 0.5 gram of fat per serving, so they could say fat free. So it's very misleading and very tricky. But so did that answer your question, Jennifer, about where those other fat grams come from? I don't see your answer. All right, let's move on. Okay, so added sugars, you're aiming low. That is the actually it was under here. So it's that'll be a separate line, included added sugars. So all these labels have improved from years back. So total sugars is 4. That's more of the naturally occurring. Added sugars is 4. So that's combined. Okay. All right. So, and it does have a little bit of sugar added. So that's where that extra added sugar comes in. Okay. All right. What else in the labels do we need to look at? I think one of the most important things to keep in mind when reading a label is, first of all, what is the purpose of reading the label? Is it, are you comparing it to something you already have? Or you're trying to find out if a certain food you're eating is healthy? I have a label here that's from lasagna, I think. And so, I think this is it. Hold on, let me find it. So I was trying to compare it to something, a healthier source. Oh, yes, this is frozen lasagna. So it says based on 4 servings. It's a 1 cup serving. Yeah, that may be plenty and it may not be, but it's 280 calories, 9 grams of fat, saturated fat 4.5. So this is a meal. So let's say this is your meal. So that's why it's important if you're having a meal and it's all in there. So yeah, we go back to the convenience foods. We talked about frozen foods, some of the healthier choices. This is a good time to look at labels. Another time is comparing your yogurts, your dairy foods. That's another time to look at labels. Also, I know people like protein bars and granola bars and that. That's another good time to look at compare the labels of what you're buying and if there's a healthier brand. So label reading, like I said, it's a little sneaky. It can be tricky, but it also can be really informative to help determine one better product versus another. You know, you could spend hours in the grocery store standing in the aisle comparing things. I don't recommend that. I recommend, you know, finding something that looks fairly decent and then maybe do some research before you go to the store. Let's say you're going to buy a new brand of oatmeal or something and somebody told you, oh, this product's really good. You could look that label up and see how healthy it is. There's also lots of resources on nutrition facts and label reading on the internet. Usually under the government, I would look at the government websites because they're the ones that control what goes out there. And yeah, So they're the ones that put the labels together. So they'll be the best resource for that. All right. Any other questions out there? I know I ran over a lot of stuff. There is quite a bit on labels, but again, be wary. You know, if a product's jumping out on a, you know, the shelf, you know, screaming, oh, it's healthy, it's good for you, you know, kind of, you got to keep that in perspective, depending on what is healthy for you, and you know, what kind of food program you're on. So, all right. If I don't have any other questions, I'm signing out for tonight. And please shoot me an email on what topic you'd like to hear more about that maybe I haven't covered. I'm usually stunned or you know, not, I just can't think of great topics to share. I steer away from comparing trending diets out there because that's a hot button. So I err on the side of caution with that. But if there's something out there you want to hear about, let me know. Shoot me an email, Tammi@WRAC.org. All right, guys, take care. Hope to see you next week.